Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. In today's video, I'm going to share a couple of ways to make shaker cards using Waffle Flower's latest release. You're probably familiar with shaker cards for congratulations or birthday cards, but today I'm going to be using Waffle Flower's latest products to make fall-themed shakers with fall colors and fall images. Let's take a quick look at the supplies that Waffle Flower sent me. This is the circle leaf shaker die. I'm going to show two different ways to use this die to make shakers and two different ways to use those little leaves that cut out as well. You could also just use those leaves as a frame. These are the nesting hexagon frames dies, and this is the kind of shaker that you can make that's a shaped shaker on top of a card. This is the wood grain stamp set. There's two different wood grains, two different widths there. These are the two-step leaves stamp set, very easy to line up the veins over the solid leaves, and there are matching dies to cut them out as well. There's a couple of different ways to make shaker cards. You can either build them up on the card or build them beneath the card, and I'm going to share both ways today. So let's dive right into making these two different styles of shaker cards. For this first card, I'm going to start with the wood grain stamp set. I have an A2 piece of white cardstock. I'm using my Misty Creative corners to give myself some room to stamp off the edge of this cardstock. So I am using one of the wood grain stamps on the right hand side there, and I'm using anti-static powder and sweeping it away and then using embossing ink, and I have my Debbie tool to make sure I get a good impression, and then I'm pouring white heat embossing powder on top. Yes, white on white, because I want to do some ink blending and emboss resist. So I'm going to continue stamping, pouring the white powder on, and then heat setting that. I'm going to do one strip at a time so I can make sure I don't mess it up and get the powder all over the place. So here is that last strip, and I just pour that white embossing powder on top. You can see that I'm working on my Waffle Flower water media mat. You can absolutely heat set on your mat as well as ink blend, which makes it a really great versatile surface to work on. Now I am using some Distress Oxide inks. I'm starting with Candied Apple, then I'm going to move on to Crackling Campfire, and I'm just blending the ink right on top. For some reason, I don't have domed foam blenders on these handles here. Those are my preferred ones to use, but these are some colors that I just haven't transitioned over to the new foam blenders yet. That will happen at some point, just hasn't happened yet. You can see that I'm actually working on palette paper over the Waffle Flower water media mat because I always worry about reds staining my mat. So there is the 3-color blend that I created, and then I'm just going to use a microfiber towel or other soft cloth and wipe away the ink that has sat on the embossed pattern there, and that creates a nice white wood grain on those colors. Then I cut out the circle leaf shaker die, and I'm going to save this one for another project, and I'm going to cut another one out of some gold sparkle foil. Then I'm going to use the Judikins embossable plastic. I'm going to put some tape runner on the back of my wood grain cut out leaf circle shaker die there, and then just adhere the panel down to the clear acetate. Then I'm going to take the gold sparkle one that we cut out, put a little bit of Ultra Bond behind it there, just little bits all around the circle and then little bits on the tip of the leaves so they don't peel back, and insert that like a puzzle piece. And now I'm going to work on the background. So on this background, I'm going to keep it white. I am going to create a rectangle of foam strips that's going to keep the shakers inside those foam strips. So I'm not going to worry about getting super close to the window as long as I have kind of a square there for the shakers to move about. I did cut out some of the leaves from that shaker die's extra die there out of mirror gold cardstock, and then I put some sequins inside as well. So it's a mix of gold leaves, rose gold sequins, and then some plain gold sequins. Just peel off the top protective layers of the foam and then lay my panel down right on top. Just press it down to trap all those little sequins inside, and that creates the shaker in that small circular window inside the circle leaf shaker die there. To add a little bit more to this shaker, I'm going to stamp some of the leaves from the two-step leaves combo. This one I am stamping the solid image in mustard seed, and then I'm going to take the vein stamp and put it right on top. That's why I like using a stamp positioner like a Misty, so that I can get the veins exactly where I want them. And this time I'm using carved pumpkin to stamp those veins. I also did cut out a couple of the other leaves, and I used the die set to cut out a plain color of orange pattern paper, and I stamped and heat embossed in white my sentiment from the Sweet Sentiments stamp set. So 3 of the leaves have the 2 layers. One, I just used the die to cut it out so that I could put the sentiment right there, and that completes the first shaker card. For this next card, I'm going to use the same circle leaf shaker die. This time I'm using the background die piece that cuts out that large kind of frame that then the inner wreath sits right inside. And I did cut it out of gold sparkle cardstock. And now I'm going to put some tape runner around it, just like I did in the last one. This time, instead of the shaker window being just the tiny little circle, we'll have this large background as well. So I am still going to use some Ultra Bond liquid adhesive, but this time I cut out those little leaves out of the mirror cardstock, enough of them so that I could hear them all behind the little leaves of the wreath. And this way we'll have the wood grain and the ink blending on the top, and it will be backed by that mirror cardstock just for those little leaves. Now I'll place some more Ultra Bond around the circle and then little dots on every single leaf. And I'm going to adhere this down to the front of the window that I created by cutting out that large die shape that also comes in this set. So you get the 3 dies. You get the large die shape, the wreath of leaves, and then a little die that cuts out 3 of those leaf shapes. Again, I'm just going to use foam tape to create a rectangle background, just making sure all those foam tapes meet together so that none of these little confettis from Studio Light Missies come out. So then I'm just going to peel off those back protective layers once again, and then I'll be able to lay my card background, which this time is an A2, whereas the panel is 4 by 5 1/4. You'll see when I flip it over. I'm just going to lay that down on top, and it's just trying to get it centered as much as you can. I am going to stamp and heat emboss from the Tender Thoughts stamp set from Waffle Flower on some Simon Says stamp vellum. I like stamping and heat embossing on this vellum because it's pretty sturdy and it holds up to heat embossing as long as you don't hold your heat tool on there for too long. I am going to use a little bit of tape runner right behind the sentiment there so that it hides, and then trim down that vellum so it just hits the sides of that sparkle cardstock. And I love all those shaker goodies inside. This time I'm going to use a bunch of pattern paper from the Waffle Flower Half Lines Caprice pattern paper pad. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to link to a video up in the right hand corner all about their pattern papers and their half pads. They're very cool, so definitely check it out after this video. I did use the nesting hexagon frames this time, not the largest one, but the second one in, and I cut out several layers of white cardstock, which I'm going to adhere all together. The blue pattern paper I cut out and adhered to some Judikins and then trimmed around the outside, and then just use some tape runner to adhere that down on top. So you can see how we're building up above the card a shaker shape rather than down below the card and opening for the shaker. So I have 2 colors of pattern paper that I adhered together for the background, and I'm using one of them to stamp some of the veins of those 2-step leaves. So this time I'm just stamping and heat embossing the veins of the leaves, and I'm going to cut them out with the matching dies. You'll remember in the first card that I just used the die set and then stamped and heat embossed the sentiment on top. This time I'm just using the vein layer, heat embossing that, and then I'll cut out the dies. So if you don't have a ton of colors of ink, this is definitely an option for you, is to grab some of your pattern paper and just cut out the leaves as they are, or stamp and heat emboss the vein layer and then cut those out. So I'm going to put some tape runner all around the hexagon frame that we created that's stacked with a bunch of white die cuts. So it's a bunch of hexagons all stacked up. I'm going to pour the sequins right in the center of the card and then lay that hexagon window with the stacking right on top of that. So as you can see, this is a shaker shape that's created up above the card. I did use the oversized Hugs word die to cut out some gold sparkle cardstock, and then I'm going to pop up those leaves that we die cut with the white heat embossed veins at the top of this card. I'm also going to heat emboss with some white embossing powder a sub-sentiment. That's why I like the oversized set has the large Hugs stamp, the large Hugs die, and then a bunch of coordinating sub-sentiments. So I'm going to heat emboss on that same pattern paper again, add some anti-static, brush the excess away, use a little bit of embossing ink on that sub-sentiment that says "and good vibes," then pour some white embossing powder on top, and then just heat set it until it totally melts. Once it's completely melted, I will cut it down to a nice thin sentiment strip, and then it's ready to go onto the card. Usually I like to pop these up, but this time I chose to use some tape runner just to adhere them because I want the shaker that's popped up to be the star of the show there, and I really love these colors together along with those gold shaker goodies inside. So which is your favorite way to make shakers? Do you like to build up the shape on top of the card or build the shaker down beneath the card? Let me know in the comments below. I'm a huge fan of shakers, so I have an entire shaker card playlist that I'm going to link to over here. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon.